Hi again, everybody. So welcome to the 2021 Augmented Human International Conference. It's my pleasure to start with the introduction of the keynote today. As you can see on the shared screen, you can find the preprint of the proceedings so on the website as well as in the chat. And the agenda for today, so we start with the keynote, then we have the presentations. Most of the presentations will be recorded to be after seen by the community of Augmented Human on the social networks channels. We'll put it on YouTube mainly, but also maybe on the other channels with a link. Then we will have the award ceremony and also the location of Augmented Human International Conference 2022. So, Mehdi, if you could start your video, I will introduce you. So, he is the research director of an international digital health group based in Geneva called the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies. He has worked and done some research for a very long time at the University of Geneva. Then he moved there. And in between, he was also a technical manager of a very big European funded project called the Human Brain Project, worth more than €1 billion of funding. He will give you more detail about it, as well as his current research. So it's my pleasure to give you the floor, Mehdi. If you can unmute your
Sure. Thanks, Jean-Marc. Thanks a lot. Nice to see all of you, and wish to all of you good morning, good evening, depending on your location. And I would like to thanks Jean-Marc again for this opportunity to come and present my current research, past research. To be honest, we have been working with together for last decade, I think, at least, and we really exchanged about our research subjects. And we have to wait for the COVID-19 crisis to get this opportunity to start discussing about more detailed research that we are doing. So it's an honor today. Let me firstly put my screen, maybe turn my camera off to help me getting, yeah, that's fine. So it's my honor today to present for you my past and future research. It's all articulated around the brain, the consciousness, and somehow for the mental health. The mental health was my starting point, and right now is my landing point again. So I keep turning around the port somehow, touching here and there different research subjects, and then getting back essentially to the mental health. First of all, I would like to give you a more precise introduction of myself. So I'm, as Jean-Marc said, Mehdi, and I'm a research director of ADAR. I'm just struggling now with, of ADAR, which is the International Digital Health and AI Research Collaborative. This is an international organization based right now at the Global Health Center within the Graduate Institute of Geneva, and I've joined them since last year. Previously, I got an IT and mathematics background, and I have been for a couple of years working on the very large databases, which are commonly today named as big data. And then, surprisingly, I've been working in the financial IT lab, one of the first financial IT lab that has been funded years ago at the University of Geneva. And I have been working on predictive modeling and risk assessments at 3 times, which are mostly have been treated and dealt with from the high performance computing vision rather than from theoretical vision. At that stage, I've been in touch with a couple of my partners from specifically health insurance, and they have been asking if there's any way to extract any meaning from the health data they are collecting, which was a very huge collection of database. Since I'm combining this VLDB and the risk assessments, I've accepted the challenge, and then I've started working on a couple of medical files, health data stored by insurance to assess the risk among their patients, to assess the risk among their subscribers, and to define the risk entry points for these health insurance. That was not very significant at that time. And then with that opportunity, I've jumped in the Conscious Analytics System Laboratory. I have founded and managed it for a couple of years within the University of Geneva, where we started dealing with more precise data coming, especially from mental health, how to create some modeling, how to create some avatars related to mental health, and how to measure the, let's say, different kind of disease and conditions related to the mental health and mental conditions like the neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer, dementia, delirium, Parkinson, and so on. And then I've joined the Human Brain Projects at the coordination office within the EPFL, where I have been responsible of the coordination work at the technical level. The Human Brain Project is one of the biggest projects in the world. It's €1 billion project, 10 years, 700 scientists. But I will give you a full overview of it. And then finally, I jumped into IDAR recently, and I'm much more right now conducting the research related to the digital health and AI, specifically on mental health within LMIC, so mostly on the global south or low middle income countries. To give you an overview of my research perspective, I've been deeply, let's say, attracted by one of the most prominent mathematical problems, which is the equation between P and NP, and the thinking that is behind. It's still always surprising me to see all this debate regarding P and NP and how we can resolve these non-deterministic complexity by simply bringing some different manner of thinking, or by bringing some IT computing capacities like quantum capacities, but also the neuromorphic computing capacity. And then as an immediate impact for the application of the P equal to MP is the question of if there's any class of problems that is possible to be solved by our brains, why could we not solve that by using high performance computing and neuroquantic or neuromorphic computing solutions? As you may see, Google DeepMind computing infrastructure have achieved a very nice results when it comes to the protein folding prediction, which is one of the biggest issue today in the cancer immunotherapy, but also in the cancer understanding. So we are in the last I think 10 years making a step of change toward the resolution of P equal to NP, but in a completely different manner. It won't be a mathematical solution. I think that it will be a computing solutions where we won't cover the entire spectrum of the deterministic and non-deterministic problems, but we will cover a part of it that could lead to some concrete answers. Let's just bring in mind that brain is not covering the entire probabilistic area of P and NP when it tries to answer to some questions. It simply goes to some of the thought optimistic solutions. And I think that this simply goes to optimistic solutions is somehow based on luck or based on the concept of serendipity that is very hard to replicate when it comes to the computing infrastructure. So what is somehow this serendipity? It's defined as an unplanned fortunate discovery. It occurs commonly in scientific discovery, and it's essentially based on openness and Bcis thinking and transdomains. We clearly need to be transdisciplinary to be open to this kind of serendipity. In medical research, and especially in drug discovery, serendipity played a role in discovery of several drugs that have had a huge impact on the development, especially of mental health and psychiatry. And we can cite the aniline purple, also the penicillin. It's not really related to the psychiatry, the LSD, and the Viagra. So these drugs have been discovered at sudden discovery. That was not their first intention. That was what we call it in clinical trials, second objective of a kind of clinical trials. So in the brain research or in the molecular research, we have different sub-area, and I have been mostly involved in psychiatry and affective science for the first part of my career, where I have been working in the medical area within the Hospital of Geneva, working on some of the neurodegenerative disease, and then on the cognitive, also within the Hospital of Geneva, working on the affective science. But if we take the brain research as a whole, then we have these four layers, which are medical, psychiatric, or cognitive, and then the biological, which is the physical anatomy of the brain, and then the ICT, which is how to detect these kind of physical activities and how to understand the physical conception and design of a brain. For multiple reasons, the Human Brain Project is a project that tried to capture most important part of the brain research within a single project. The Human Brain Project is one of the three FAT, which are the Future and Emerging Technology flagship projects. It started 9 years ago, and it is one of the largest research projects in the world. The more than 700 scientists and engineers, more than 120 universities, teaching hospitals and research centers from all Europe. And they are all together to address one of the most challenging research targets, which is the human brain and how to understand the human brain. We have clearly two major achievements or innovations within the Human Brain Project. The first is the new type of science, by creating this synergy and favorizing somehow the serendipity that we have been talking about at the interface of empirical research on the brain with some of the advanced computing. So we are really bringing the advanced computing research within the neuroscience, advanced neuroscience research. And the second is the building of the ecosystem of a new culture of collaboration. This is a meta research level where we are bringing these kind of collaboration between brain medicine, brain-inspired technology, medical for brain, and a lot of other area. So the innovations that we are bringing at the Human Brain Projects go hand in hand with the development of the new digital research infrastructure. And the research infrastructure, named eBrains, is one of the most powerful resources today created by the Human Brain Project for the scientific community at large. And I'll show you the component of this research infrastructure. This kind of research infrastructure is introducing some new symbiotic relationship between neuroscience and information and communication technology and AI. And then the researcher from neuroscience and from ICT are jointly co-designing technical solutions that are tailored for the brain research. So first of all, and before starting about the Human Brain Project, there is a brain inside the Human Brain Project. And the idea is, I'm still always surprised when people ask, how do you do within the Human Brain Project? So firstly, we need a brain. So we got two brains from generous donors, gender balanced from a woman and a man, 62 years old and 78 years old. And then these brains are very carefully prepared, preserved in paraffin, and then cut into 7,000 slices, as you may see in pictures. Each of these slices is in depth of resolution of micrometer. Each of those 1 micrometer scans is becoming an image of 10 or maybe 15 gigabytes in size. So during the cutting process, we have to cut off often cells into 2 pieces sometimes. And then if we want to 3D reconstruct these sections, we have to find the 2 matching elements of a cell that has been separated. Since there are a huge number of cells, the task is very time consuming, hard, but very essential to get a correct overview of the brain. So we really reconstruct the brain according to its physical structures coming from all these different slices. So although the brain is not very big in terms of cubic centimeters, there are about 100 billion nerve cells. Each nerve cell has about 10,000 contacts, and there's approximately the same number of glia cells, what we call the matrices in French, which are also important to the brain. So we see that there is a very big complexity to reconstruct the brain and to be able to simulate it. But the amount of data is also huge. So one of the first work that has been done within the Human Brain Project is about how to create a brain data repository that could allow the sharing of data, finding easily the data, but also using the data. And with this 100 billion neurons and the 100 trillion synapses, the human brain is very complex, and it's a multi-level system. So the connections among the neurons from a hierarchy of circuits, from a local micro connection up to the level of the whole brain. So we need to reflect that inside of our data. So the brain data repository is based on an expert-driven knowledge graph, which combines metadata ingestion pipelines, human user input, and multiple quality assurance processes. We need these quality assurance processes because of the sensitivity of the data. And then we need to help contributors and users by ensuring that the data delivered is consistent and from high quality. So inside of this brain data repository, we have implemented a FAIR process, a FAIR for fundable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. And it's open for external people, and users can apply for support to have their data and models curated and annotated with standardized metadata to facilitate discovery and reuse by other researchers. What we do with these data is essentially, once we have reconstructed all these connections between neuron and synapses, is to create these 3D atlases. There is already a couple of atlases existing in the world, and this one is a little bit beyond existing sensitivity of existing atlases. So it provides special reference systems for neuroscience, and it gives users the ability to navigate and to analyze information on the basis of anatomical location. So the atlases define its shape, location, and variability of brain regions in common coordinate spaces. And it allows interpretation and integration of and comparison of a lot of observations and measurement collected from different sources on different brains. The Human Brain Project Atlas integrates different facets of brain organization. So it represents a complementary map of structures, functions, and connectivity that and access to the deeper in the visualization till the connection between neuronal connections and synapses, and see exactly what is happening there. It's also open for external users, and users can register and can then run different experimental data sets to the same references atlas, so they can see exactly the impact of their experiences on the brain on the simulation manner. And these data sets once registered within the atlas, allowed the users to inherit the special information associated with the known 3D atlas or map. Once we have started doing with atlas or working with the atlas, the immediate need is to understand how neurodegenerative diseases are impacting the brain. And that's why we have on the top of that built this medical informatics platform, a federated informatics platform. It's designed to help clinicians, clinical scientists, and clinical data scientists to adopt advanced analytics for diagnosis and research in clinics, where users can explore harmonized medical data extracted and pre-processed, and then they can see some medical records and research cohort dataset without transferring original clinical data. So there is in the medical informatics platform, there is the federation data and models aspects that are strongly anchored there. The data federation provides single source of data for experts, but the original clinical data is neither moved from the hospital, uploaded to a cloud, nor copied or pasted elsewhere. Only aggregated findings, which are models, usually, or knowledge produced by combining information from multiple sources, are analyzed in those federated analysis. So we have the 3D atlases, we have the medical informatics platform, and we have the brain data repository. The last step we need within the Human Brain Project is how to create a simulation of the brain on the basis of all these findings. Simulation acts as the main conduit for interchange between experiment and theory. Simulation is the most important part of our work, especially when it comes to the neuroscience. So if we can simulate a Parkinson or a disease within the brain atlases, and then we can make a comparison within the medical informatics platform with the data from real disease, we can understand the disease evolution within the simulation, and we can start predicting. It's a very powerful instrument to understand the human brain. It's very complex, and it's also very challenging. The human brain, as I told you, contains 100 billion cells and 10,000 connections to other neurons from each of these neurons. So the current computer power is clearly insufficient to model an entire human brain at this level of interconnections. What we have done is a simpler approach, and we have adopted to make it a little bit less extensive in terms of computing powers. So simulations take places at several separate organizational levels in the brain, from molecular to subcellular to cellular, and then the entire brain. And the level of decay is increased as the level rises towards the whole organ. So that's what we have decided to do within the Human Brain projects. Instead of making an entire brain simulation, let's do a chunk simulation, depending on the level of that is being observed. So we can talk about the microscopic level and below, where we have neurons which are in the focus. So what we do is a simulation, and we can think about neuron as electrically excitable cells that transmit message, and this is what exactly simulates. And at the macroscopic level, we can examine assemblies of neuron or set of neuron and their roles. And that's what we simulate instead of simulating the entire brain at once. Beside the brain simulation platform, within the Human Brain Project, we have been also working on the conception of models at the whole brain level, which are bigger than what I have been presenting during this simulation approach. In these models, the smallest unit is not a neuron, but a population of neurons. So we took the chunk again, and then we create this population of neurons together, which corresponds to the resolution of brain imaging. So as deep as we can go, as fine we can go within the resolution of imaging, we will take this chunk as a whole set of neurons. These whole brain models are done for both right now, for the mouse and for human brain. and are directly integrated within the 3D atlases. So these models that we are doing can, for the moment, be used to predict and study pathology. A couple of clinical research are running within the brain simulation platform. The most interesting one is about epilepsy or about stroke. So how can we run this brain simulation, knowing that the high performance computing requested and the amount of computing power requested is huge? This answer is addressed within the brain-inspired technology. We would like to try to study the brain and to have a computing platform that will help us to study the brain. And the best thing to do is to create a computer platform similar to the brain, or that imitate the brain, that will help us to study the brain. So it's somehow the infinite loop of we need the brain to study the brain. And our first machine is the Brain Scale S, which is built right now between Manchester, Germany, and Switzerland. And its first aim is to really build a thinking machine, or what we call it, the neuromorphic computer, that is based on physical, and then analog, or sometimes mixed signals, emulation of neuron, synapse, and plasticity models with digital connectivity running up to 10,000 times faster than real time. Let's keep in mind that there is a big part of the analog here, because we are seeing a big shift in with the AI from what we used to do till now to the getting back to the analog computing paradigm that we used to use decades before. So along with the quantum computing, as DeepMind from Google are doing, the neuromorphic processes are one of the most promising technological avenues in the development of artificial intelligence. And the progress is linked to the ability to process in real time a large volume of unstructured and heterogeneous data. It's like the brain, a lot of unstructured data and heterogeneous data. And what the brain scale is, for example, is simulating the functioning of neurons and synapses in the human brain by a neuromorphic chip that could perform millions of parallel calculations that only supercomputers today are capable of doing. So we are shifting from a high performance computing to a neuromorphic computing, where we do not need big computing centers. We need these new chips, and these chips are calculating a big amount of data. But the question that raised within the brain-inspired technology, is it because we have these chips today together that we have a brain? Do we have a conscious once we got a full set of these chips that are imitating neurons? And the question is, if we can create a thinking machine, can we create a computer that really emulates the human brain? So although the neuromorphic computers are massively parallel devices that compute in a way that is very comparable with the human brain, there is still a lot of debate on how to quantify the computational power of the human brain and its memory capacity too. But it's in any case a finite number. So a lot of people are arguing that something which will be possible within the framework of technological development, because this is a finite number. A different vision is emerging based on different kind of research. One of the most prominent researchers is Simon Berkovich, and he calculated that despite the considerable number of synapses that contains the brain's storage capacity is insufficient to contain the memories of a lifetime with the emotions that are associated. There's also other researchers from neuroscience part of it, and let's cite Herms Romchen, who demonstrated that the storage of all memories in the brain is anatomically and functionally impossible. And this is from the neuroscience part of it. That brings us the core issue of what we call the hard problem of consciousness, and how anything or any stuff become conscious. Is it because we have all these chips connected together that we have conscious? or is it for something else? And this is called the mind memories, mind-body problem. So how to create this distinction and how to understand how to make these machines more intelligent. We are clearly talking about two different concepts. The brain as a calculation infrastructure, and the consciousness that represent the data, interactions, and outputs being calculated. And these problems can only be, at the beginning at least, addressed from a philosophical issue or from a philosophical perspective. So we have two philosophy schools. One is Descartes and second is Spinoza. Descartes is mostly remembered for his duality theory of consciousness, in which physical body is separate from immaterial minds. So the mind is something and the consciousness is something not located within the brain. And his famous "I think, therefore I am" is the mind-body dualism, that the mental phenomena are non-physical and that the mind and the body are distinct. Then modern brain imaging seems to indicate that it's much more Spinoza's concept of an integrated mind-body that is closer to the reality. And then there is a nice work from the famous psychologist William James on consciousness 300 years ago, that is regaining a pivotal position, and that is bringing some more understanding of the link between consciousness and the brain. The technological advances in brain imaging have given us a new range of tools to more accurately observe and measure the apparent causes and manifestation of consciousness, as you can see in the picture. So the functional magnetic resonance imaging produces vivid images of the area of the brain that respond to different stimuli. And instead of purely subjective response that made me feel good, scientists today can understand exactly what does it mean from a neuronal perspective to feel good. So that joins the concept of somehow pan-psychism, and it's about the Spinoza vision that there is a consciousness, there is a conscious everywhere in the universe. So, but does it clearly mean that we are awake? How does this consciousness, as defined by Spinoza, come about in the first place? How do sensory impressions create not just a neural signal, but a sensation, and not about the color of red, but maybe a sensation of redness? Why do we have a feeling that it's like something to be ourselves alive in the world? Again, from a philosophical point of view, the concept of panpsychism draw a holistic approach that mentality is fundamental and ubiquitous in the natural world. According to that, the smallest bits of matter have very basic kinds of experience, and thus an inner life and a mind. Every single dynamic system on the universe got a mind. This is the vision of the panpsychism. But from a biological point of view, these signals flows in many directions at the brain at once. Different brain regions are called on the to perform different functions. So the crucial point is not that all of the information produces conscious experience. Most of it seems to pass under the radar, with only a small portion rising to the level of conscious awareness. That reduces the chance of the overlap between the brain and the mind or the consciousness. So some of existing theories today and 20 years ago comes up, like the integrated information theory, which starts from the essential properties of phenomenal experience, from which it derives the requirement for some of physical substrate of the consciousness. It argues that the physical substrate of consciousness must be a maximum of intrinsic cause effect. So it's related to the material again, and that brings us back to the panpsychism, which is a very strange and a very complex theories about the mind is everywhere. But it seems that many research are leading that the panpsychism is somehow a real fact. But suddenly, 5 years ago, the panpsychism is again criticized, and Spinoza is getting back in the fights. Descartes is getting back in the fight, sorry. So what is happening is we have seen a couple of new and exciting research about the brain in the extreme conditions in the near-death experience and during resuscitation after heart attacks or after dying. And then for more than 20 years, let's cite Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiac doctor and professor. He has studied near-death experience in patients who survived the cardiac arrest. That's exactly his domain. In 2001, one of the famous manifests of near-death experience has been published in the Lancet. And starting from the actual definition of brain and consciousness relation, it seems that it's not possible to experience consciousness during a cardiac arrest when circulation and breathing have ceased. But during the period of unconsciousness due to a life-threatening crisis like cardiac arrest, patients may report the paradoxical occurrence of enhanced consciousness experienced in a dimension without our conventional concept of time and space and brain and consciousness. So they have some cognitive functions, emotion, self-identity, memories from early childhood, and sometimes extrasensory perceptions about their lifeless body. So the conclusion of Pim van Lommel is that consciousness is not localized in the brain, and the brain has a facilitating function and not a producing function to experience consciousness. So the brain is acting, let's say, as a modem that is translating some signals received from outside of the brain into actions or into thoughts. And that's the role of the brain. The consciousness is fully located outside of the brain. In the same pathway and on the same research area, Dr. Sam Parnia is trying to bring an answer to the fundamental question of, does consciousness continues after our brain dies? And jointly with Pim van Lommel, they are conducting one of the most exciting clinical trials about the awareness. The name is Awareness and Aware 2, about the awareness during resuscitation. And they are doing a prospective study on that. It's very supportive to other recent studies that have indicated consciousness may be present despite clinically undetectable consciousness, meaning there is no sign of any activity within the brain, nor the body or the heart, but patients still describing things that happens after detecting there is no longer any vital signal happening within the body. Finally, and one of the most controversial studies is about the Pribram holomic model of brain processing, and it's done by Carl Pribram, and he simply shows that memories cannot be stored in brain cells, but only in a coherent patterns of electromagnetic fields in neural networks. So it's much more about a network, external network produced by the activity within these neurons. And according to him, the brain works like a hologram rather than as a computing machine. So these are existing controversial research where we discuss about the consciousness and the brain. But going after these kind of frontier between the mind and the brain, the idea is, so we are imitating the brain and we are trying to reproduce these artificial neurons. How can we, inside of these neurons, bring some consciousness? So 3 years ago, many researchers have succeeded in reproducing these small artificial neurons. This is the one shown in the picture, and it's from the respiratory neurons in rats. and it reacts under a wide range of stimuli. So at the University of Bath, they succeeded in modeling and equating these extremely complex responses of biological neurons, and they then designed the silicon chips that mimicked the ion channels used by real neurons to communicate with each other. Then they proved their artificial neurons behave in response to various stimuli like real neurons. This project already paved the way to the more biggest projects, but it brings a huge breakthrough in the manner of development of medical implants. As example, they are right now developing a smart pacemakers that won't just stimulate the heart to pump at the steady rate, but use these neurons to respond in real time to demands placed on the heart, which is what happened naturally in a healthy heart. So, but other possible application could be the treatment of conditions like Alzheimer's and other neuronal degenerative diseases. A second very interesting project just started between UK, Switzerland, and Belgium, which is the Stem Cell A project. And this project is a hybrid approach. It layers networks of stem cells resembling the human cortex onto microchips. So we have both of them integrated, and this is more closer to the augmented humanity than ever before. They will then stimulate these cells by firing changing patterns of light beams at them, and then sophisticated 3D computer modeling will allow them to observe any changes the cells undergo, how to improve the capacity of these cells by bringing some more electric or electronic powers into that. The goal is to build a neuromorphic circuit and combine emerging electronic devices with biological neurons, and this project is a major step towards this target. The context, what we call it, the synthetic biology. It is very impressive to see how the computation in living cell is evolving from digital through analog again and moving towards a neuromorphic computing paradigm. There is also a very interesting results being published months ago from the Brain Gate projects. This is somehow one of the first outcomes from concrete use of implants. And the Brain Gate project has, for the first time, decoded the neural signals associated with writing letters, then displayed typed version of these letters in real time. As the participant imagine writing a letter or symbol, sensors implanted in his brain, this is very invasive, pick it up on patterns of electrical activity, and then the algorithm interpret the trace, the part of his imaginary pen. And then the brain-computer interface is something very similar. Although we have created some, this is the brain-computer interface, and it's in Grenoble, it's done in Grenoble, but instead of simply creating a mean of communication between patients and the external world, the Bci project is creating an interface between the brain and exoskeleton. This is also an invasive approach, and it makes use of a wireless 64-channel electrocorticogram recording implants, and the name is WIMAGINE. It has been developed in France in Grenoble and is designed for various clinical applications. So what happens that patient who received the implant, who is there in the picture, had succeeded to particularly control a program that simulated walking and made manual multi-joint upper limb movements with 8 degrees of freedom. So using a unique model, which was reusable without recalibration for up to about 7 weeks. So no need for further calibration when you start using the exoskeleton, it will remember you. Finally, and last but not least, we have to talk about the Neuralink and Pager, which are, we have to mention them and watch carefully what is happening there from the company of Elon Musk. They are currently conducting their first trial of the implanted brain chip with monkeys and pigs, and aim to make it generally available for everyone in the upcoming decade, since most of us will have some kind of neurological problem over time, as Elon stated. They are preparing for first human implantation soon, pending required approvals and further safety testing. Although the device they are using demonstrated was only a read device receiving data from the signals in the monkey brain for receiving the data. The final plan is to provide both read and write capabilities with the goal of being able to address neurological issues. Finally, one of the most recent, and this is a week, last week, or maybe 2 days, 25 have been published at Northwestern University, and the paper is wireless multilateral devices for optogenetic studies of individual and social behavior, or how to drive mice to bond by zapping their brains with lights. So mice with teeny devices implanted in their brains showed a great affinity to one another in an experiment when the signals were synchronized within these implants. So we are clearly manipulating these mice, and the light being activated within these senses activate a teeny piece of the cortex and then fire to neurons. And after zapping the two mice at the same time, at the same rapid frequency, within a minute or two, the animosity between the two creatures seems to disappear. There is no fighting, and they cling to each other like friends. Finally, I need to not over explain points, but I have to bring, because this somehow seems to be the future. We have a lot of ethical issues in the brain research, given that the brain is becoming available to outside interference and affections. We have clearly to consider the aspect of responsibility, privacy, and personal liability. Under normal circumstances, persons have a level of control on explicit consent regarding the question as to which of their data to be collected, to what end such data may be processed, and this is named clinical trial consent or data consent. The person involved in clinical trials can opt for this kind of disclosing and allowing or not processing of some of their data. With a device implanted into the brain, may directly and unlimitedly collect data from the person's brain and leave the person unnoticed. And even if he may not be capable of controlling it. Secondly, another question to be noted is whether the interferences with the human brain and its functioning through implants would remove the person's free will, or whether it will encourage the person to faulty actions out of his free will. And this is about writing and manipulation. And also there is reading and predictions, meaning if we can read what is happening inside of the brain of human, can we read this memory? Can we detect some crimes or some future crimes? And how should we act upon that? And this is why we have this minority report there. Finally, there is the problem of equity. Today, we already have the problem and the issue of equity, but a recent study shows that a small subset of affluent citizens will be able to afford fundamental biological and technological upgrades. And this calls into question the right of people to access such services. We will create two classes of citizens, augmented citizens and less augmented or normal citizens. In future, the people will be forced to reconsider what it means to be human and how strategy and policies need to evolve. The future is very near. We have seen all these implants and all these mice experiments, but also all these simulation being done. I think that in the next 10 years, we have to fully consider ethics, and we have to start doing that before even building these products. The problem of equity is should be resolved immediately, because we have seen what is happening with the vaccine equity distribution. And although many calls regarding the vaccine equitable distributions across the world, 75% of the vaccination process is only being done within 12% of the entire world population. And that brings to us the problem of equity. I will end with this ethical consideration. I have prepared many more other slides, but I think that it's time for me to end that. And I'm welcoming any of your questions. Thank you for that.
Small microphone issue. Yeah, I was saying thanks a lot for this mind-blowing presentation. Mind-blowing is a word to use at the end of your presentation. So we have only a few minutes for some questions. So any questions in the audience? I guess you can use the hand. You can hand waving. Then I can give you the ability to speak. Any questions, or you? Maybe I will put on the allow you to use the chat. So should be possible now. Yeah. So for me. At the moment, so you underlined Elon Musk Neuralink. We don't know all about it, but do you think this is the most advanced project at the moment?
They do not give a lot of details regarding the Neuralink. So there's a very few data. He is much more interested in getting a pool of experts joining his team rather than doing concrete research for the moment. And that's the hardest part of it, because these experts are often not really attracted by huge sellers. They are doing this research in an analytical manner, and it seems that the goals of Elon Musk is beyond the ethical framework we have today. So it's a very dangerous area. We don't know how it will turn. Month ago, we come up at the European Commission with the AI framework, legal framework, which somehow restrict a lot of experiments within the AI, and when it comes to the human being and the consciousness, the brain, but many other subjects. So clearly, an experiment with AI within the brain in Neuralink projects won't happen in Europe. So that's clearly forbidden. So it's very advanced because they have a lot of resources, from at least from a technical point of view. But it's not one of the most advanced projects for the moment. It's much more one of the richest projects, let's say, than advanced. Next, I think that next studies will mainly be, or next funding will be much more coming from serendipity effect. We may end up with some findings when it comes to the brain simulations, the implant inside of the brain, like what we have done for the Viagra, without really being in the legal framework of doing this research on the consciousness. It's as I told you, it's something very very strange. But since it's very restrictive, unless we got this secondary objective coming on the surface, on the table, suddenly it will be very hard to go deeper in this augmented humanity from the brain perspective, at least, without getting outside of the legal framework.
Okay, thanks. There is a question on the chat about work from Solms and Fristons. They ask you if you have seen it. It's called Consciousness and Solms' book, The Hidden Spring. The Hidden Spring. Have you seen it already? No. Ah, sorry, we don't hear you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I've seen it and heard about it, but honestly, I did not got the opportunity to read it yet. I see the let's say the canvas of the Hidden Spring book, the kind of presentation of the consciousness, the philosophical approach of the consciousness, but I do not have further details on the content of the book. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, when we don't research in this area, there are so many surprising notions that can be presented. I was really surprised also by this consciousness and the fact that anything in the universe might be part of this global consciousness. It's very intriguing. But also,
that's one of the major issue we have today. Is everything consciousness? So any piece of the material or life like electron or atomic level got some consciousness, and then it's about itself or himself in this case. This is one of the most intriguing parts. And the second intriguing part when it comes to the consciousness, where it is located. Many researchers tend to show that the consciousness is located within the brain, but many other researchers are showing that the consciousness is located outside of the brain, and that the brain is acting as a modem or as an exchange somehow interface between the consciousness, which is completely outside, and the brain, which is the computing machine. And that's a very surprising new trend in the research, because till now this mystic level of research of thinking was not under the fundamental science, and suddenly we start talking about it as a full consideration within the research. This is no longer a thought. This is a concrete working hypothesis, and people are doing research toward that, to establish that the consciousness is located outside the brain, something like what we always call it a spirit, you know, my spirit. And then that brings a lot of sense in somehow in our thinking, but also it's a big mystification of the entire science approach for the consciousness and brain.
Yeah, it's an intriguing approach as well. Also, when does it started, right? Because even if it's external, so when did it start, or did it start? So
yeah, we clearly are at the beginning of a new era of brain research, and whenever you see big players, let's say Elon or the armies and usually military research sectors, when they start investing in this area, then you can know that this will be the next trend, at least for the 10 to 20 coming years. And I think that we are only on the start. We do not really understand and measure the complexity of the issue and the problem. We are trying to bring some concrete solutions by bringing some research infrastructure, some simulation tools, but that's not all. That's not all.
Okay, so thanks again for your great presentation. We are going to move now to the accepted submissions to the 12th Augmented Human International Conference. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Bye.
Yes, we keep in touch. Bye-bye. Okay, so for the presenters here, I remind you that you can find the Zoom background image in the chat and as well on the website. We have uploaded also the proceedings, the preprint on the chats and on the website. There is a password on the website, which is AH2021. And now, so we are moving to the long paper presentations. The first one is going to be presented by Hao-Ran Xue. And it's called X balloon animated objects with balloon plastic actuator. So I just will give him the access to sharing the screen. Where is he? Just check. Hao-Ran. Okay, so Hao-Ran, I'm going to give you the co-host role. Then you can try sharing your screen.
Thank you very much.
It's working.
Yeah.
Great. So yes, please, you can start your presentation, and then after we'll have a few questions for you.
Excuse me, can you also give the access to my another account, because I will use another account to present the slide.
So which is the
another one? Can you see it? I have two accounts here because I have. Sorry.
Yes. Okay, so maybe this one as well. Cost.
Thank you. I got it.
Okay, good.
Sorry, wait a moment. There's some problem with the software.
On our side, it seems okay. Huh? We see your slide. Huh?
You see my slide?
Yes, we see your not the full screen slide, but now we don't see it anymore. Yeah, so here we see, we see it now.
Okay.
Yes.
Seem good. Okay. Okay. Thank you for introduction. My name is Haran Xie from the Japan Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. This is from Japan. Today the title is X-balloon animate object with the balloon plastic actuator. We augment the balloon to make it move to achieve very complex dynamics. So I think it's worth to share this project with you. So here, when we consider about robotics, traditionally, that is a hard robotics that we can see in the left side. This is the Gundam. This is quite popular, famous in Japan. And we know that this is kind of like a toy. Everything is like this. It's rigid and it can move like a transformer in movies. That is quite a strong one. But recently, we also the research topic of the soft robotics. Something like the Big Hero 6. This is the Disney movie. We can see something that we need some very soft robotics that is quite safe and quite use some soft materials that is very friendly to the user, that we can, this is how soft robotics works. Actually, so we can see this is the start point of the software actuator. This is we can say this is software actuator developed by Harvard University. This is they use the different actuator. I think they use the 4 actuator here. So this is like the 4 layers of the of this kind of like a worm. This is a robot. So, but it's not easy to make this kind of software actuator. We see that we need a 3D printer. We also need the resin to make the model. Then we put everything to the model. So we need to require some professional equipment and materials to make this. And also this is very time consuming to make such one software actuator. So you see, we need to glue it together. We need to even wait for 4 hours. Then we can get a bending actuator like this. This is what happens for the normal one. So basically, this research is belong to the topics in the human-computer interaction. It's called the shape-changing interface. So chip change interface recently is a hot topic in HCI. So in that sense, we can use different input and output. So in this case, we don't have the output like just a pixel on the computer. Maybe we can get some physics output like something like this. This is a pin display, so we can really feel that things, even from the virtual world, we can feel it. So also there is papers that they used some airs to make this kind bending actuator to make it move, and also there's use something like a balloon to make it even can bend it in very big size. Also, our previous work, so we also designed the clothes that can change it by itself. That we have a hole here, so that you can close the hole. So we can close or open the hole automatically. It depends on the temperature, whether you feel hot or not. So basically, we get the inspired from this idea. This is called a sticker actuator. This is actuator can attach to some simple objects like this. This is a crane, origami crane. And when we put it on it, so the crane can fly. So this is a quite simple idea. We use this kind of air bike. Then we put the air, then it can move. So, but in this case, they just get a very simple dynamics. Also, it is not easy to make these things. Actually, they use some they modify the 3D printer to make this. So we want to make something complex, get complex dynamics, and also that is very easy to fabricate. So our proposal is like this. This is quite a simple way. We used a very long balloon. This is a twist balloon. Also, we used the normally plastic film like this. Then we designed together. So the price of this is quite cheap. It's just on around $0.2 US dollars. So compared to the other special ones, they needed some special materials and equipment. Ours is very just use some normal materials around us, so we can make it. Also, we use the sewing machines. Especially in Japan, that is sewing machine is very normal for every family. Almost the mother will use the sewing machine to make everything for their child. So this is the sewing machine here. So the principle is like this. We put the balloon inside the plastic, the bag of the plastic. Then we put the air inside. Then they can bending like this. This is a video we can see here. So it can be a bending actuator. And to fabricate it is also quite not difficult. You can see we use 2 layers of the film. Then we first design the shape of the actuator. After that, we can cut the shape, and we first to use sewing machine to collect to along the sketch, the line, to fix this 2 film. Then we cut it. After that, we insert the balloon inside the plastic. Then everything done. when you put the air into it, it can bend in. It's very quick and very easy to make this. So as I introduced before, we only need 6 steps. We need one paper. You draw the model shape on the paper. This is the first step. Then you just design any shape by a marker pen. It can be a triangle or any curves that you want to design. Then you use the zoom machine to zoom them together and cut it. Finally, you insert the balloon inside. So and then you tie it with some bonding band. So it's done. Actually, we also invite the element school students to make this because we want verify it actually not easy to build to make one. So we just ask the child. This is around 10 years old, I think. So we found that they can even make it by themselves. And they have different ideas to make something quite interesting. This is things. So we can introduce some basic principle, why it happens, why it works. So the normal thing is like this. This is the paper we published last month. This is in attributes of the robotics. We used the machine to detect that it can really bend in with this kind of design. Here we used just the signal waves. So we didn't, right now we don't have clearly know what it happens. We just know a very basic symbols. For example, when we know this is about the plastic, in this side, when we put the air inside, we can see that here will become the shape is like this. Before they didn't inflation, so it's like 2 lines, right? After inflation, there will be a circular. This is the imperfect case. So we can see that. So the new length is become to just the 0.64. So the length will be just around half of the orange length. So it happens that this side will become short, while this side keeps the same. So it will be bending. So this is just the best principle why it works. In the future, we will do more simulation works to verify this. This is right now what we know about this. So after that, we designed a different design of this. We changed the different shape of the each waves, we call it. So finally, we get something like this. We want to know what happens with the different parameters, the design parameters, also the bending wise. So we want to what exactly how much they can bend in. So we can find something like this. This is we use the polymer approximations. We can see something interesting like this. The blue one here can bend in quite a lot. Of course, also the pink one here. Right now, we don't know the principle, so we just make a different design. We want to use it for different applications. So we do a user study to confirm the fabrication experience of this kind of actuator. So we ask the participant to make one. So we want to know it's easy or it is funny or interesting to do this. So we invited 10 graduate students, 3 males, 7 females. It's around 23 is a graduate student. So when the work is like this, they use a zoom machine to actually do fabricate this one. So this is all them did to the fabricate. So we also do the questionnaire for verify the difficulty and the safety and the fun for the fabrication procedure. We do it twice, before and after. So we want to know what happens after they experience these kind of processes. So here is the result. Basically, we used the well-conscious sand run tester to compare what the difference before and after our experiment. We found something interesting here is that most people think that they even can reproduce our actuator even without its structure. So they can do it by themselves. So it's quite easy to do this. And most people, after experience this, they found this is quite interesting and very fun to do this. Of course, they want to recommend this actuator to their family or friends. This is what we get from our simple user study. Also, we did to use for make different applications. It's almost something the static toys we want to make it move, like a duck. This duck is a normal one, but we just put one actuator here like this. I think this can be some useful for maybe make it really swim like this. When we put the air, it can really swim. So we can make this kind of toy or object can really move. Also, we want to achieve some complex dynamics, complex movement like this. This is a walking caterpillar. So we use the two actuators here. So we can see that they can something like a walk like the real worms. We can see from different sides. So from the side view, you can see this is what happens when we put the air. They can walk like this. Also, for the origami crane, we just use one actuator that can fly, something like that. Finally, most of complex one, we use 3 actuators here. We want to simulate some like a tree under the wind. So wind comes, it will swaying. So we can use it for some more 3-dimensional movement. So conclusion. This work we proposed a new shape-changing interface with the balloon plastic actuator. This kind of actuator is low cost and easy to fabricate and very efficient. So our purpose, our target is to make soft robotics for anyone. So anyone can use this kind of technology, even young child, even without any background, they can use it. So finally, what we want to do is that we want to make it for some human augmentations, also more complex dynamics. This is work from Sign Robotics. This is called Omni Skin. They use it for the little pony. They can make it work. Also, they also use it for the clothes. You can see that they put it on the like the wearable device. If the wearer have the wrong wrong posture, they can adjust it. But also we can see that everything here is very complex. They even use the 4 bendy actuator for 1 foot. So we think that if use our proposal, everything will become very simple and it can work very good for the future applications. And that's all. Thank you very much. Yes, that's all.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. Now we can have some questions. So in the audience, I think I've allowed you to ask questions with your microphone. You can unmute yourself, or you can use a chat to ask a question. So maybe let me start for the questions. If there is no question yet on the chat. Yes. Alors, this is an interesting approach to try to minimize the cost, but have you tried to estimate how many times it can work as well? Because this might not be strong enough for too many times use. And so yes, so do you have an idea on how long that kind of material could last when it is used for a device or an application?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. This is also the bigger issue for us, that actually this can, we found that it will break for multi times. For example, that for the simple one, for example, the duck here, we use it maybe 10 times. After 10 times, it will break. I think the most thing here is that because we use the balloon is not so strong enough for the affordance. So in the future, we think that we will change the material of the both the film and also the balloon. I think the balloon itself is fragile, so we will use some rubbers, more stronger materials for inside. Also for the outside, for the retina is film. Maybe in the future we use clothes or some more plastical, softer plastical to make it in more stronger one. It can more afford the multi times. Yes.
Yeah, actually, you might have some tissue as well, which is could be sewed and as well inflated.
Yes.
At the same time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, and then more generally, do you? I guess also it helps you to do you work also on more stronger like type of inflated actuator as well? I think, or are you only focusing on cheap ones, or you have also maybe in another line of research stronger ones that are more like actually very interesting for some types of applications and actuation?
Yeah, that's exactly. There's a balance. I think that, for example, for the element school students, we think that this kind of cheaper one is enough. This is for maybe education, robotic educations, that they will feel curious about this kind of principle of the software robotics. But for more product, for the factory or more products, maybe in the future we will use it for medical use or more for health applications. That in that case, definitely the price of this is not the big issue. The big issue is to make it stronger and for more accurate, I think.
Okay, great. So if we have no other questions in the chat and nobody has other questions, we thank you again for your good presentation. I remind that at the end of the day, we have the awards ceremony. Thanks, and then we're going to move on to the second presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the second presentation is a work, I think, by Mariam Alimardani, and I think she's here. So let me find her. Okay, I saw her before. Okay, yes, I saw her. So I'm going to make you as co-host, then you can share your screen.
Thank you.
And the title of your contribution is Deep Learning for Neuromarketing, Classification of User Preferences Using EEG Signals.
Yes.
So the floor is yours.
Yes. Do you see my slides now?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. To those of you who are in European countries, maybe if you're participating from other corners of the world, I hope you have a good day. So my name is Mariam Alimardani. I'm currently an assistant professor in Tilburg University in the Netherlands. and I mainly work on brain-computer interfacing. Today, I'm presenting a work that was done by one of my master's students, which features deep learning for neuromarketing. So we have done a deep learning approach on EEG signals in order to classify user preferences. So a bit of introduction of what neuromarketing is. Well, neuromarketing is a subfield of neuroscience, computational neuroscience, and it studies the brain to evaluate, predict, and potentially manipulate consumers' responses, behavior, and decision-making to different products when they are provided to the consumer in form of visual or audio stimuli. And in a way, it's also called consumer neuroscience. So as you can see in these pictures, normally in neuromarketing studies, people are exposed to visual stimuli, sometimes auditory stimuli, while their brain activity is being collected. And the idea is to be able to understand what goes in their brain, in their neural activity while they're observing this, and how we can correlate their responses, their subjective or behavioral responses to the activity pattern changes we see in the brain. So in a way, they rely on these systems called brain-computer interfaces. And this system, what they do, they record brain activity in invasive or non-invasive ways. So most of my work is actually on non-invasive EEG signals. And then they try to process the signals to decode features relevant to the task and apply AI models in order to be able to predict the task or the response of the user to the task. And then the decoded signal can actually be used for control of an external device. So sometimes these systems are also called brain-machine interfaces because you connect your brain to an external machine. It could be a wheelchair for a paralyzed person to be moved by the power of brain, or it could be just for healthy users working with games, VR, or social robots. So most of these systems so far were what we call active BCIs, where the user actually have to control their brain activity to think of a particular task, maybe a movement task, maybe select something on the screen, and then we'll look at the change of the brain there. But there is this new trend in brain-computer interfacing research, which focuses on passive BCIs, where the task of the user is not to focus on the BCI stimuli, but rather do something else, for example, drive or maybe watch some kind of movie. And then the system is supposed to find the background mental states of the user. So it could be the attention level. In case of driving, drowsiness is something very risky that we need to detect. Detection of emotions is particularly important when it comes to interaction with social agents. And then what we have in neuromarketing research is actually detection of approach and withdrawal behavior. So it's kind of like, it's similar, but it's still different from emotions. So emotions have very fixed categories when it comes to their detection. Sometimes you have the arousal and valence 2D space to work on, but approach and withdrawal are about that first time response that the brain shows to an unseen product and how the human decides to either like it or not like it. And there is research, neuroscience research, that shows that very short exposure, the beginning of exposure, is kind of determinant on the behavior of the user afterwards. And that's what we try to do here. Now, there is literature on neuromarketing applying AI models to EEG signals in order to be able to detect consumer choices or consumer preferences when they're exposed to a certain stimuli. So in this research that was published in 2019, researchers showed different mobile phones to users while they recorded their brain activity. And then they also asked them at the end of each stimuli presentation whether they would like to buy it or not. So they would just go through the properties of the phone on the screen. And then they also report their subjective response to the question that was asked of them. And once they had the signals collected in that experiment, they applied spectral analysis in which the signal is decomposed into high frequency and low frequency bands, and the energy of the signal in those frequency are extracted. And then they applied a support vector machine and found a very good accuracy, a very good level of prediction by the classifier, in this case for consumers' intention as to whether buy the phones or not. Then in another study, the authors used a different data set. They actually collected their EEG signals when people were watching images of consumable products, such as, for example, a bag, sunglasses, bracelets. And then for each product, they also showed 3 different types of brands. And then they asked a simple question from the participants, whether they liked the product or not. And then this way, they actually, using multiple feature extraction methods, they found 70% accuracy. And in the BCI field, actually 70% accuracy is a decent level of prediction. So what is common about the previous literature in neuromarketing and in general BCIs is that most often EEG signals go through a few steps of pre-processing, pruning, where you remove the artifacts from the noises that were in the environment or by the movement of the participant, and then you apply some feature extraction methods in order to be able to classify the signals. So in this process, you actually have a lot of handcrafting and manual labor put into the pre-processing of the data. And more importantly, you also lose information, because with artifact rejection and feature extraction, part of the information is gone, and what the researcher is looking at is there, remains there. So an alternative that has been introduced recently into the BCI research is usage of deep learning approaches. So in deep learning methods, what you do is that you provide the EEG data directly to your model, and you have this neurons, the perceptrons, that will learn through some layers in the model, and then whatever the model learns is passed to the classifier, the classification layer. And the advantage of these approaches is that first, they can handle large amount of data, and more importantly, they can directly learn complex features from raw signals. So it's not like I only focus on the spectral powers and that's it. The model decides what are the relevant features to the task that was done by the subject. So there is this recent literature review that was published in 2019, which looked at all the studies that applied deep learning on EEG signals. And we realized that there is a huge amount of work on emotion recognition, mental workload, motor imagery, event-related potential, seizure detection, and sleep studies, but there were none on neuromarketing. And among those who applied deep learning on EEG signals, only 22% of them used raw signals with artifact signals. So still, people preferred to go through the pre-processing stage to extract some features from the data in order to have better results, better classification results at the end. And then also the same review reported that the convolutional neural networks were like the most popular architecture for EEG signals because the convolutional filters are able to learn the features the best. So in this study, we actually wanted to address that gap in the literature. So we decided to apply both machine learning and deep learning on 2 EEG data sets that were related to neuromarketing field. One of them is the same data set that comes from the study of Yadava et al., who showed different products, the same products I was talking about, sunglasses, t-shirts, shoes, in 3 different brands. And then in their study, they actually used a consumer EEG headset to collect EEG data from the subjects when they were watching images of these products. So each subject watched the product for 4 seconds, and there were a total of 25 subjects in their data set. Then in addition to that, we were also collaborating with a neuromarketing company here in the Netherlands. They are called Unravel Research. And then from them, we also got access to another data set that they collected in-house, in which they showed 6 different movie trailers each lasting for about 30 seconds to user while they were recording the EEG signals with this mid-fidelity B alert system. So B alert system is, it usually has better signals than consumer EEG headsets, like the emotive that was used in previous data set. So we selected two data sets, one with rather high mid-fidelity EEG and the other with consumer EEG. And we wanted to see whether we can make a comparison between machine learning approach and deep learning approach in prediction of consumer choice. So in both of the data sets, consumers, after they saw the image or they saw the movie trailer, they were asked whether they liked the product or the movie. So in the previous data, they were just asked a simple question of whether you like it or not. And then in the movie data set, they were asked on a Likert scale to say like to what level they liked the movie. And then we made a mini split here. So whatever rating that we had above 5, we call it the liking group, and whatever rating of the subjects were below 5, we said that this was indicative of the unliking, disliking, or perhaps not wanting to watch the movie trailer. So in the next phase, we did apply the classification approaches. For the machine learning, we followed the same traditional, the same classic steps. So we had the raw EEG signals, we pruned them, we applied a spectral analysis on the signals where we decompose the signal into different frequency band, and then we looked at the average power in each band. And then using those features, we passed the features into an ensemble classifier. We made sure that we use ensemble classifier, not just solely rely on one classifier, because we wanted to have the best of what machine learning can present. And then in the next approach, what we did, we just passed the raw EEG signals with no further pre-processing. So EEG signals also including noise to our deep convolutional neural network. And here is our result. What we got is that for data set 1, both of the classifiers, both of the models perform chance level, which means that they basically could not tell what the product choice of the consumer was when watching the images. The result we got with our machine learning model is even lower than the original results that the authors of the data set reported. And then for data set 2, we actually found a decent level of performance by our deep learning model, which was significantly, well, maybe not significantly, but it's still higher than the machine learning model. And we also wanted to know why this is the case, that for data set 1, none of the models are learning. We actually looked under the hood, we looked at the summary of our model in deep learning approach, and we saw that there was an overfitting problem. So the model continued learning from the training data set, but it was not capable of doing any detection in the test data set. In order to discuss this, we want to first say that this is the, at least to our knowledge, the first case of applying deep learning with no data pruning to EEG signals in a neuromarketing research. And we could reach 70% accuracy, which is an acceptable threshold in the BCI field. We do have some arguments as to why the data set, the first data set 1, could not really show any promising result in none of the machine learning and deep learning classifications. First of all, we think it could be blamed on the headset, the EEG headset that recorded the signals. So we all know that Emotive Epoch is a consumer level headset. We actually have one in our lab. And usually when we are recording data with it, after like half an hour, we have to apply solutions again. So it's not really ideal for research. Then the next reason that we think could be relevant is the lack of data in the recording. So the images were watched and EEG was recorded for only 4 seconds. Whereas for the movie, there was more information provided to the user, and also there was a longer recording. There was 30 seconds of recording. So also more data for the deep learning model to learn from. And finally, We think that when looking at the product images that was selected by the authors that published the dataset one, they were not visually appealing or engaging, or at least not as appealing as what we usually see in regular e-shopping experiences. Whereas in dataset two, we had richer experiment stimuli, and the videos were able to perhaps induce more responses in the brain. And then we did a comparison of our result with the existing literature, and we found out that our classifier did not reach the state-of-the-art classification performance. So what you see with most of the previous literature, well, some of the previous literature, not most of them, is that they are capable to reach 80 to 90% accuracy. However, this is done after many steps of data preprocessing, artifact rejection, and feature extraction. So usually in these cases, what you see is that multiple feature sets have been selected and tested, and then multiple classification algorithms are also tested, and they are all compared against each other, and the peak accuracy is reported. So what you see here, the 80–90% is the peak accuracy. Whereas what we did in our research is that we just work with the raw EEG signal, and we think this is more robust for online classification of neuromarketing stimuli. So to conclude, applying deep learning methods to neuromarketing field is new. Neuromarketing lies in the realm of passive BCIs, and in general, detection of brain responses passively, where there's also noise and brain responses relevant to other tasks is difficult. But our study shows promising results regarding prediction of user likings and choices. Then we think that there is a lot of potential for deep learning in future EEG studies. The main advantage of deep learning over machine learning is that you can do end-to-end learning, which is you just pass your raw EEG, and then you are going to remove the labor-intensive and time-consuming process of EEG cleaning. And then finally, this is a suggestion for future studies if they want to do EEG data collection or neuromarketing research. The salience of the stimuli is very important. So the choice of the stimulus data, the stimuli set should be based on what stimulus can capture participants' attention the best and can induce responses that are extractable by the classification models. So that is the end of it. Thank you. I would like to thank also Nikki Lewis and Tom van Bommel from Unravel, who shared their data set with me.
Okay, thanks a lot for your presentation. Any questions in the audience? So you can also use the chat or speak.
May I have a question?
Yes.
In the traditional machine learning method you used, I remember you used the 3 approach, the SVM, random forest. So is there any difference of the accuracy among these 3 approach?
So is that our classifier or the literature classifier? Are you referring, so let me just bring back the slide related to your question. So there is this literature, the peak accuracy reported by Gulnar-Nick is reported from the support vector machine, and then peak accuracy reported by Yadava et al., whose data set we also used in our research. This was data set 1, was from a hidden Markov model. But in our machine learning approach, we used an ensemble classification with 3 classifiers. And what happens here is that the ensemble classifier, so each of these classifiers, support vector machine, random forest, and logistic regression, they make a prediction, and the highest level of accuracy is picked for that stimulus.
Thank you very much. May I have one more question? Because your
yes, you can.
Model, thank you. Your deep learning model is based on the raw EEG signal, but the machine learning method is based on the feature vectors. So what happens if we use the deep learning model for the future vectors? So in that case, can we get more accuracy?
Yeah, so this is what people do a lot, even those who apply. So this is exactly what I said in the literature review that Craig and colleagues did. They found that even with deep learning, many prefer to choose to go for the pre-processing and feature extraction, because eventually the model learns better, apparently, for some cases. So for example, for motor imagery BCIs, where people have to actively think about movement, we know what are the underlying mechanism of movement in the brain. We know we have to look at the sensory motor area. We know that there is like this specific band of mu band, which gets even related desynchronization and synchronization, and you can look at those features. So with those, it's usually the case that extracting the features and then applying the deep learning works the best. But I think for passive BCIs, where we yet do not completely know how liking and disliking shapes in the brain and what are the brain responses for that, it might, like the classification might benefit from this, what is known as the black box of deep learning that learns the features on its own.
Yeah, I see. Thank you very much. Very great.
Thank you. I had myself a few questions regarding the ethical aspects of neuromarketing. So do you take that into account? How do you think it would work if it would be used in real life?
Yeah, so this is exactly what I see and why I collaborate with Unravel. So they are actually quite popular and they have a lot of clients. And the main idea that their clients come to them is they want to know whether, for example, their commercials, their packaging, that is effective for the consumer. So what they usually do, they collect brain signals when people are exposed to certain products. Different version of packaging, for example, different version of commercials, the stimuli the company makes for capturing the attention of the consumer, and then they report to the client whether they think that the brain is focused on this particular packaging or not. So this is what we already see. So there's this kind of approaches, the neuromarketing, the consumer neuroscience is already being used for evaluation of subjects' responses, consumer responses. But I think the future is going to be even more interesting. I mean, there was talk of Elon Musk and whether we are all going to have the link in our brain. So if that is the future, where all of us are kind of connected to these devices, then there's going to be quite a risk on how technology can influence our decision making and our behavior, particularly when it comes to business and marketing.
Yes, okay, great. Thanks for your presentation. If there is no other questions, we will move to the next presentation. So the next presentation is by, I think, Bastian Schmeyer. I think you are here. Let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will make you co-host. Then you can share your screen. Yeah. Okay. So,
thank you.
Yes, and so so your presentation is going to be about manipulating virtual objects in augmented reality using a new ball-shaped input device.
Yes, exactly. So just to be sure, I prepared the presentation beforehand, and I have a video to play that is the presentation, and then I'm okay for the questions afterwards. So
okay.
I welcome you to my talk about manipulating virtual objects in augmented reality using a new ball-shaped input device. My name is Bastian Schmeyer, and it is my pleasure to present our topic today on behalf of my colleagues. Augmented reality, or AR, allows enriching the physical world with digital objects. These objects can be manipulated using specific controllers. The more direct and intuitive the controller interaction is perceived, the deeper the immersion into the digital environment, and that is an ultimate goal for all of us. Over the years, numerous controllers have been developed for both research and the entertainment industry, but none of them provide the characteristic of orientation invariance, so there's no up and down. For some purposes, orientation invariance can be a potential improvement over classical controllers with a defined orientation. For example, digitally exploring round structures, such as virtual planets in AR, or passing controllers to friends more easily in multi-user scenarios. AR platforms allow new controllers to be integrated in order to design novel interaction techniques. So we used Birdie as our new AR interaction device. The original application area of it is screen interactions for patients who are hindered in verbal communication. It was developed within our project Activate for intensive care units. However, in an explorative study, it was revealed that participants tended to spontaneously interact playfully with the soft Birdie device when holding it in their hands. Performed actions were, for example, rotating, shaking, and pressing the device. This opens up a design space far bigger than just ICU patients interacting with screens. Birdie was neither used before in AR nor to manipulate virtual objects in general. But Birdie provides multimodal feedback through its elasticity as well as through colored LEDs, a vibration motor, and a buzzer. In addition to these actuators, gesture input is detected via its built-in sensors. These sensors and actuators resemble conventional AR or VR controllers. This means that Birdie should be capable of being used as an AR input device by connecting it wirelessly to an AR output device like the HoloLens. Thus, Birdie could be used for manipulating virtual objects that are placed in front of users. We described concepts for 4 different interaction techniques for exactly that. They all adhere to a set of atomic rules. Every technique is based on 4 common rules, while they differ in a unique set of additional rules for assessment. The majority of the rules follow the findings of the research community, but additionally, we had a design workshop with experts to evaluate and revise these rules if necessary. So let's see our common rules, starting off with direct manipulation, which means there is a direct link between the input device and the virtual objects. Moving or rotating the input device has an immediate impact on the object. This is very common and feels natural. To improve precision, scaled manipulations are used. Instead of having a one-to-one mapping, the translational impact is modified by an intelligent scaling function, in this case the PRISM algorithm. It improves precision in fine adjustments and helps in big translations. This also prevents errors caused by noisy sensor data. Next up, the interactions are providing juicy feedback. This is a gamification term, and it means that the AR space gives multimodal feedback that is rich, inviting, fresh, and coherent. With the sonification principle, there's a special auditory cue to convey additional information. During the manipulation, a repeating sound cue is playing, and this sound cue shifts its pitch according to the translation velocity, giving the user a sense of speed. These were the common rules. Now let's go over the additional rules for assessment. 3 additional rules were defined. Unlike the previous rules, these here can be implemented in different ways. Our interaction techniques differ in which of these rules they apply. Virtual objects can be manipulated in 6 degrees of freedom, rotating around the 3 main axes and translating along them. Many tools offer a separation of rotation and translation, resulting in 2 modes. Since there are conflicting findings in literature concerning if this separation leads to better results, let's implement this rule in 2 distinct ways. So, while exerting pressure on the input device, users manipulate the object in all 6 degrees of freedom simultaneously. Letting go stops the manipulation. The users can reorientate the input device in order to manipulate further. This concept is called clutching or ratcheting. The other way to implement it is carrying out the manipulation in two separate modes, translation and rotation. These modes can be switched between using voice commands. The translation mode works accordingly what I described before, and the rotation mode, however, transfers the rotation input directly to the virtual objects without the need for ratcheting. Users may even change their grip on the input device to turn the objects by large angles, and it is also not necessary for turning the device back into its starting orientation due to the device being orientation invariant. The second rule concerns gravity. After picking up the object and letting go, it falls to the ground under the influence of gravity. A physics simulation confers mass to the virtual objects in addition to a slight bounciness. The last rule looks at collision. Users handle the virtual object as usual, but are restricted in their manipulation by the surrounding space. This is preventing users from moving the object through walls, the ceiling, or the floor. As a recap, we are testing the separation of degrees of freedom and ratcheting, gravity, and collision. By combining different sets of rules, 4 distinct interaction techniques were designed. Not all possible combinations were feasible, since we don't want to have objects falling through the floor. Let's go through the concepts. First, we have the simple integration interaction technique that uses ratcheting. Compared to this, the separated interaction technique divides the rotation and the translation into 2 modes. On the right-hand side, the collision interaction technique adds collision into the mix, while the gravity interaction technique further uses gravity as well as collision. Now that the interaction concepts are laid out, a demonstrator was implemented allowing the users to manipulate a virtual object using one of the 4 proposed interaction techniques. A Unity application deployed on HoloLens generates an AR environment and controls the interaction logic. The challenge of tracking Birdie during the AR interaction can be separated into 2 subtasks: tracking Birdie's rotation and tracking its position. Using Birdie's internal sensors, its orientation can be calculated using sensor fusion. But tracking Birdie's position by only using internal sensor data, also called dead reckoning, does not yield an usable tracking information due to cumulative errors. In an alternative approach, the demonstrator uses HoloLens hand tracking capabilities to track Birdie. HoloLens sees hands with its built-in depth sensors that are typically used for mid-air gestures. Holding Birdie with an angled arm allows HoloLens to precisely determine Birdie's position. The demonstrator was used in a study to evaluate the described interaction techniques. 12 participants that didn't know about the Birdie project beforehand tested them. They showed a high affinity for technology interaction with an average ATI score of 4.9, and the average age was 26 years. The interaction techniques were tested using a simple docking task. The room was divided into a display and into a user area, and in the user area there was a virtual reference chair that was projected into the center of it, showing the target position and rotation for solving the docking task. When starting the task, the user sees a second chair floating in the air with a seemingly random placement. This chair can be manipulated using Birdie. Using one of the interaction techniques, the user tries to align the second chair congruently with the reference chair. Here you can see all movable chairs and the reference chair below them. Before starting, the participants had time to playfully explore HoloLens. The test order of the interaction techniques was randomized to prevent learning effects, and the participants solved the docking task 3 times for every interaction technique. To minimize the learning effects even further, every task iteration used different starting properties. Let's see the results. The user explicitly ranked the interaction techniques according to their preference. counting the participants' favorites, the gravity interaction technique and separated interaction technique won. Coming from a performance perspective, to evaluate precision, the position error and the rotation error of the user's solutions were calculated. Further, we looked at the task completion time. Regarding the room scale interaction, all 4 interaction techniques allowed precise results, deviating on average less than 5 centimeters and 7 degrees in an interaction distance of 3 meters. The precision resulting from the integration interaction technique was better than from the collision interaction technique, and the standard deviation of the position errors is highest in the gravity interaction technique, while the separated interaction technique has the lowest deviation. In general, participants achieved the best precision using the separated interaction technique. This indicates that the separation of rotation and translation is more precise than simultaneously 6 degrees of freedom manipulation. However, users took 14 seconds longer to solve the task compared to the average task completion time of the 3 alternatives. Each participant quickly adapted to Birdie as an AR interaction device. The integration interaction technique was explicitly praised by 2 participants for not restricting manipulation in any way or form and giving users the full control. The collision interaction technique gave the participants a tool of assistant, and the gravity interaction technique was consistently described as natural, and most participants expressed being more immersed deeply by seeing the object behave in line with their expectations. Considering the 2 modes of the separated interaction technique, all participants stated that they liked being able to translate the object without accidentally rotating it. This resulted in more vivid manipulation, making use of the scaling algorithm. People liked that the 2 separated modes are supporting their natural way of problem solving, lowering mental strain further. Consistently, the ratcheting-less rotation mode was preferred, which shows the importance of orientation and variance. As shown in the ranking, the gravity interaction technique and separated interaction technique were preferred by most participants. Interestingly, both interaction techniques and the results differ a lot. The gravity interaction technique provides the most inaccurate results. However, the participants had the most fun utilizing it as some kind of tool for placement. Meanwhile, they also preferred the separated interaction technique, which allows for the highest precision. By eliminating the ratcheting, it could even lessen the fatigue and the strain on the wrist. Overall, this shows a trade-off between intuitiveness versus precision. As desired by 2 participants, a new mixed interaction technique consisting of the most promising rules of both of these interaction techniques should be investigated further. To recap, we investigated how users can manipulate virtual objects in AR using ball-shaped input devices. Birdie, as an example device, provides unique opportunities that other devices lack. A rule set for interaction techniques has been defined, and 4 interaction techniques were proposed and implemented in a prototypical demonstrator that was used in a user study. Our results indicate that gravity and separated rotation and translation showed the most promising effects. Further, a trade-off between intuitiveness and precision became apparent. Thank you for listening.
Yes, so I'm open for questions.
Okay, sorry for the delay. There is a small problem with my other computer, so I'm trying to see why it doesn't work anymore. But I'm on this one as well. Any questions in the audience for your presentation? I'm checking the chat. No. Yeah, there was one. Someone raised a hand. Who raised hand? I'm not sure who. If you have a question, so you can put it into the chat or just speak. Myself, I was interested in this device. So, what do you think that one day when we have really augmented reality devices worn by us and so on, do you think that such device could be very widespread, would really bring added value compared to just using, for example, your raw hands, and in HoloLens, for example, the hands are recognized, the movements of the hands. Do you think that it brings a really added value, and if so, which ones?
So yes, I think that devices like this bring an added value, of course, like in special contexts. So I don't think it will be a widespread thing because just of how consumers would buy it. I mean, you see the same thing with the HoloLens that is more for industrial applications, but there are many opportunities that are just not possible with normal controllers, that if you want to rotate them around, then you need to rotate them back. And especially multi-user scenarios should be done research in, or using devices like this with two hands, using two devices, just rolling devices like this on the floor or on the table to have intuitive interactions, to use the physical form of it so as a tool that just doesn't work with a Vive controller.
Yeah, so it's for more like a specific, you see it more in more specific applications or usage, and then where interactions that don't really happen in daily lives might be needed, right?
Yes, I think so too.
So then have you some plans for like maybe producing it in more larger scale, or selling it as some kind of device?
Currently, there are no plans for producing it in a larger scale. We have, I think, 13 of these devices right now. They're single-handedly produced. We want to see what we can improve on this first version with maybe better sensor data, better sensors, and see how we can maybe have like an external tracking system, an internal tracking system, see how we can make the tracking better, learn from these results here, as you saw with the positional tracking. If this can be solved in a further object, then we can see if this could be a commercial item at one point.
So we have some questions actually in the chat. So one is, do you think Birdie will help with disabilities play video games for disabled people?
Yes, I think especially seeing the relatively small input channel of just rotating like sensor data and pressing, which is just in sense like one button, compared this to a keyboard, for example. We need to think differently how to implement interactions. So here, for example, with this demo, I didn't have any menu systems, but let's think about designing a menu systems for people that can just use one hand. This device was originally thought for ICU patients that are waking up in a hospital and don't know where they are. They can move their fingertips. That's the first thing that people move, and they cannot speak. They can just use maybe one hand. So I think that this is a great opportunity to rethink how to use, like, for example, entertainment systems and games. It's not just about information systems, it's about entertainment too, yes.
Also, there's a link for some related work that you might be interested to look at in the chat. Someone sent a link for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have no other questions for your presentation, according to the agenda, we have a break up to 1 p.m. So the next presentation will be 1 p.m. You can still be here on the Zoom or reconnect on the Zoom later. I will leave it open. Thanks again for your presentation, and remember there is also the award ceremony at the end of the day. So
yeah, see you later.
To be here. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. And we are so stopping until 1 p.m. And then at 1 p.m. we'll have the next presentation. Thanks.